You screw up at NASA, the worst that happens is you get fired or you get to a bad desk. You screw up in Star City, you might get a bullet in the back of the head.
Hello, this is Michael R. with Den of Geek here at San Diego Comic-Con 2025, and I'm here with Ronald D. Moore, who is one of the names in sci-fi television that, once you attach his name to it, it's gold, like the Midas touch. Welcome.
Well, hopefully.
Yeah. The record speaks for itself in this case. We have a series of shows now that are having spin-offs made of them, and of course, if the original hasn't succeeded, the sequel is going nowhere. So tell us a little bit about what you're here at San Diego Comic-Con to talk about.
A lot of things, we were talking about the last season of Outlander and the spin-off series Blood of My Blood. We're also talking about moving forward with For All Mankind into its 5th season and its spin-off, which is Star City. And I'm working on adaptation of the video game God of War for Amazon Prime.
Now, when you start a series, are you always thinking about how it could be expanded upon as a larger universe, or does that come once you realize that it's going to stick with audiences?
I think at the outset, it's always in the back of my mind, like, okay, what could this be? Because you're always playing around, what's the potential for the story? How big is the story? How many seasons is it? Can you expand the universe into something else? But it's really a back of the head kind of calculation. When you're really working on the show in the writer's room and in production, I try to focus just on what we're doing right now. We're trying to get from here to here at the end of the season, and I'm not too concerned about what could happen later. I think a mistake sometimes is, we'll save that for next season, or we'll save that for another series. It's like, don't save anything. Just make the best story right now, and in success, you have opportunities, and you can always find something else later.
Unlike the Outlander prequel, we've got Caprica is a prequel, but of Battlestar Galactica. Let's talk about Star City for a minute, because Star City is kind of told in parallel. Yeah. So does that kind of leave open the option to see some of the same things we've seen in For All Mankind, except from a different perspective? Will there be overlap, in other words?
There is some overlap, but it's not so much. It's not the point of doing it. It's not really to tell the exact same stories or the same sequences from a different point of view. Even though we have some of that, it's really to tell a different story, because the cosmonauts and the people on the ground in Star City and the Russian program had a whole different series of problems and a whole different series of objectives. And they operated in this system where, the KGB is lurking around, and, you screw up at NASA, the worst that happens is you get fired or you get to a bad desk. You screw up in Star City, you might get a bullet in the back of the head. So it's a very different kind of world, and we're sort of fascinated with what it's like to do something like space exploration in that kind of world. And it does operate in parallel to some aspects of For All Mankind, but it's not really the focus is like to always, okay, and this happened over there, so we're going to do it again. You want a little bit of that so the audience can see the connections between the two shows, but the show itself has its own kind of narrative drive.
So no character cameos in the works?
I would say never, but it's not really what it's about.
Speaking of For All Mankind, we're going into season 5 soon. And it's funny that we're kind of in between all of the different seasons. We're in a limbo state with all of your shows right now. But season 5, 2012, is that correct?
I think so, yeah.
So we are we going to stay in the Mars atmosphere and the fight for resources and independence and all that kind of stuff?
We're moving that story forward. It's like, after season 4, Mars had moved to a different place. Now it has even more people in season 5. The relationship between the nation states on Earth has become more complicated. The Martians themselves have to ask themselves questions about, well, what do they want? Who do they want to be? What are they trying? What are their goals? And they're in this weird limbo place as well. You started as explorers, then colonists. Are we a people? Are we different? Are we a nation? Do we even want that? Is that reasonable? So it's an interesting sort of, geopolitical idea that's happening and being debated on Mars, in addition to space exploration and pushing the boundaries of what else they can do within the solar system.
For All Mankind is kind of unique in that you've got creators already steering the ship, as it were. What's the difference between a relationship with a show like Outlander and another show that your name is attached to it, but there's other people in charge?
It's similar on both those paths, because I started, I started both of those series kind of show running them day to day, right? And then transition to somebody else. Matt Roberts on the Outlander series and Blood of My Blood, and Matt Wolpert and Ben Nadivi on the For All Mankind franchise. You work with them and they start to really understand what you're doing. We all participated, in the writer's room together, so they were all of them were deeply involved with me in writing and producing. And by the time I got to the place where I wanted to step away and delegate it to them, it was a very smooth kind of transition and handoff. And then it becomes like, it's now your show. You are the showrunner. I'm not showrunning this anymore. My name is still on it. I see the creative. We have conversations, but it's your choices. It's your vision. It's now you take it and you go off and you do things that I wouldn't have thought of and that I wouldn't have done. And there's a great deal of satisfaction for me and pride, and it's gratifying to see them take all those shows and go off and make them their own.
Of course, Blood of My Blood is probably the closest to realization of all the different things that you're involved in. So let's talk about that for a minute. It's premiering next month. So can you talk about its origins? And I'm specifically thinking of a moment in the books where there is a car accident. And you've kind of taken that as a jumping off point. Can you talk a little bit about where did that idea come from and how did it come to fruition?
Again, Matt came up with the idea to jump off from that point. What if this? The books have, a lot of material of backstory for both Claire and Jamie and their families and their parents specifically, and what, how they grew up and what happened in their childhood, and also what happened before they were born. So there was already a lot of that was seeded throughout all the Outlander books. And what Matt did was decide, okay, we're going to take this element and combine them and put them together and create a narrative that's not, necessarily in the books, but is definitely in the spirit of the books. So it was a really interesting take that he had on it right from the start.
Are you able to share what Diana Gabaldon thought of the Claire's parents' idea?
She was very supportive. It was, I know Matt ran it by her before he pitched it to the studio, and she was like, oh yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, and it does fit with the continuity if you think about it.
Absolutely.
They didn't take it any farther than that. Tell us a little bit about Jamie's parents and what's the historical context we're dealing with, and his very powerful parents in terms of their...
there were hints in the show about his parents and Ellen and the Mackenzies, and the Mackenzies have this long history, in Scotland, and it was referred to many times in the show, but it was also deeply sort of explored, or at least explained in the books, where she came from, how did Lollybrook figure into all this, what was the sort of clan associations and what were the conflicts. So again, it was drawing from all that to kind of, paint a picture of Scotland, which I think was fun for us and for the audience to go back to Scotland. Because if you're, Outlander at the outset was all Scotland all the time, and then it moves to France, and then it came back to Scotland, and and then it goes to the colonies, and it becomes North America. And even though we would go back and touch back into Scotland, through Outlander periodically, there's still something fun about wanting to go back to Castle Leoch, wanting to explore, Colum and Dougal and all those fascinating characters that we posited there, but didn't get a chance to really do more with. So that was a big fun thing. Like, oh yeah, we're going to get to go back into that world again.
I was thinking of that because I think some of the fans were kind of like, oh, I kind of missed that once they got to the colonies.
We did too.
So were you able to resurrect any of the Highland sets or revisit some places that you had been there?
To an extent, you will see some familiar places, yeah.
All right, you talked about you're going to be adapting God of War. Now, this is a story that's one of the richer stories that's available in video game storytelling. Now with the success of The Last of Us, for example, we have a very similar story in the God of War, father and son. What can you tell us about that, if anything?
Not much. I can just tell you we're in the throes of it. We're writing scripts. It's been a great process so far. And as someone who's new to this world, I was really sort of impressed with the depth of what you're talking about. It's such a rich environment. The mythology is so well thought out. Corey Barlog, who did God of War, is a remarkable person. You ask Corey, why did Kratos do this? An hour later, he's told you all this stuff and how it's all interconnected and why certain choices were made and what they mean and, what are the secrets and all this kind of stuff. And it's been really fun to just really dive into this world.
And of course, those who know Kratos as a character, I don't know how you're going to cast that character, first of all, but all right. But,
well, I was going to play Kratos. I thought that was part of the deal. So I'm just going to shave my head and grow the beard longer. So.
That's right. So I just want to wrap up with one quick praise for Battlestar Galactica, which is one of my favorites, of course. List of best pilots ever, we have 33, except I think it had a benefit of being able to build off of a miniseries. Would you ever think of doing a pilot that had such a huge amount of tension in any other series besides Battlestar Galactica.
It was unique. That was a unique thing. And it's funny you call it a pilot because I thought of it as sort of a second pilot for the show. You know, the miniseries, when David and I created the miniseries, was technically, okay, we're going to do this as a miniseries, but it's a backdoor pilot, you know. And then when they picked up the series, David said, you know, you got to sort of reestablish, think of this as sort of a second pilot. But because there was so much history with the miniseries, I didn't have to set up the world too much. I could just throw you into the situation and still introduce all the characters and still introduce the concept. But there was no pressure from like the network to sort of say, well, no one's going to understand this, because you know you could kind of take all that as read. And I'm very proud of 33. That is it. I saw it again not too long ago, and I was very touched that it holds up. It's a good, it's a good piece of TV.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining us today,
Absolutely.
Ron Moore, and have a good convention.
You too. Thank you.